Hey guys, Excoundrel here, welcome to the channel. This is going to be a little bit late because it's been about 2 weeks of this meta already and I haven't made a video on this composition. The main reason I hadn't made a video on this composition was because I just wasn't having very good games with it. It's a really easy composition to play at lower elo. I think when you get to Masters Plus, a lot of people know how to deal with it a bit better. So it's one of those ones that's a little bit harder to play and you kind of have to high roll it a little bit. But anyway, G2A sponsored the channel, the link in the description below. Let's talk about this composition. Usually on a Monday, I would do a VOD review of a viewer's game. But I actually haven't had many submissions at all. I think I've had one and the quality wasn't great. So I'm going to do it. I will do more reviews of viewers' games, but I need more videos, guys. Give me more videos to review and I will be able to review them. But I just haven't had any submissions, which has just meant that I haven't been able to do a review. But I will do a review if someone gives me a video to review. Okay, so this is really easy. It's Vanguard Mystics, and it's obviously all centered around the Vanguard front line with the Mystics as the support. Your damage comes from Cassiopeia and mostly from Jace. So it's Cassiopeia and Jace, and then your late game is driven by Thresh Urgot. Now this build is about to get seriously nerfed in 2 days. Not so much that it's not playable, but definitely so much so that it's going to be a little bit harder to play. So, what do you do in the early game? Well, you prioritize tier on the carousel. If you can get a tier on the carousel, you're in a good spot for this because you need blue buff. Blue buff is the 100% essential item, followed by Morello's because those are for Cassiopeia. Your early game is quite obviously going to be driven by Vanguards. There are a few ways to play it, but usually you're going to end up finding Poppy and Leona. You can either play for a cybernetic start with Vanguards, so doing something like this Lucian with with blue buff actually isn't bad at all. So you can give Lucian the blue buff. If I can find where the blue buff actually exists, here it is. Lucian with blue buff is perfectly fine. Morello's can go on Lucian as well if you want to put it on him. But you can start with a Vanguard start. The other with a cyber start. The other start that you can go for is quite literally, if you find a Cassiopeia, is quite literally this: 2 Vanguards, 2 Mystics. Where's the blue buff gone again? Now, all Mystics are 3 costs, so it's going to be a little bit harder for you to find, I think. But one of the great things about this build is if you get an early Bard, you're in such a good spot. So this is what your early composition could look like. Your aim is to then get up to 4 Vanguards. Jace is like one of the critical Vanguards to have in this composition. He really becomes kind of like a secondary carry. But your mid game might end up looking something like this: 4 Vanguards, 2 Mystics. Okay. This is what you really should be aiming for. Then what's going to happen is you're going to eventually drop the Poppy and Leona for the Nautilus and the Wukong. And obviously you can drop these whenever you kind of get them. But this is what your front line is going to end up looking like. I like to have the Wukong and the Jace in the middle because they're going to get the most AoE out. Cassiopeia obviously with the blue buff and the Morello's. Jace in terms of itemization, GA, Dragon's Claw, that kind of stuff. He's the guy that's going to be doing the majority of your damage in this game. Another item that you should be on the lookout for is Rapid Fire Cannon, because that means you can move Cassiopeia to the back like this, and you can just constantly spam fangs at everybody. Level 7 is an interesting one. You're going to have options. The option that I like to go for is usually going to be Astro, and that Astro, I'm just going to quickly move down a little bit so I can find it. That Astro is going to be something like a Teemo or something like a Gnar, and that's going to allow you to generate experience with Bard. At level 7, you're going to be wanting to roll to stabilize, i.e. get a 2-star Nautilus, 2-star Jace, 2-star Wukong, 2-star Mordekaiser, 2-star Cassiopeia, etc, etc. And then, once you've stabilized, you can go to level 8, and then you're going to add a Karma, and then you're going to add also a Soraka, which are really important. And obviously, if you've got the Rapid Fire Cannon, you can position like this. If you don't have the Rapid Fire Cannon, I would recommend positioning something like this. But the Rapid Fire Cannon is obviously really, really important here. And then obviously you want your Karma to be on the Cassiopeia. You want to protect her as much as possible. It's not really about the attack speed, it's more about the shielding. That shielding is going to allow Cassiopeia to spam abilities across the board. What you're going to want after this is Thresh. So you're just going to bring in a random Thresh. And on your bench, you're going to want to have Urgots, okay? Thresh needs to be 2-star. Shojin's is a great item for him. And that is what your composition looks like. Ideally, if you can, 3-star Jace, 3-star Nautilus, 3-star Cassiopeia. But Cassiopeia and Jace are the best 3-stars that you can get in this composition. And eventually, once you get to level 9, you don't need Bard anymore, and quite clearly you can drop him for Lulu. And that will be your composition. Cool, let's go through a game. Okay, so Treasure Trove is a great galaxy for Vanguard Mystics because Vanguards do really well with items. Now, I didn't get the tier to start with. I decided to go for the rod instead for the Morellos. I did try and go for the tier. Tier is the better option in most cases for a Vanguard Mystic game. Now, I definitely remember making some mistakes in this game, so I'm going to try and go over those mistakes as we go along. I think it worked out okay in the end, but there are definitely ways that I could have played certain parts of this game better. But this is the biggest thing for me here. If anything was going to cement that Vanguard Mystics was a pretty good starting build, getting a Jace from a loot orb is always a good sign that Vanguards are going to be a great opening gambit for you. Jace is incredibly strong. There's a reason he's getting nerfed. There's a reason he's losing 50 HP on the next patch, which is going to negatively affect all of his style values. And look, quite clearly, getting a Jace and a Cassiopeia in the opening stages of the Treasure Trove is going to make you want to play a Vanguard Mystic comp. A double Jace and a Cassiopeia quite clearly is a good starting point for a Vanguard Mystic comp. The one thing that I would say is that I did not have a tier here, and that is obviously going to impact the way that the future of this plays out. Now, the mistake that I made here is that I thought that I'd be better off not playing Cassiopeia and just using Jace with a rod to potentially just look to sort of go through the early game. I just thought that a double Jace might have been stronger in the early game than a Cassiopeia. Unfortunately here, as you can see, I ended up missing a lot of damage simply because Jace just didn't... Jace just hit the Fiora when she ulted, but we still managed to win. Double Jace is very strong. It's a lot more immediate damage and a lot more burst. But I do think Cassiopeia is a good early unit that I probably should have considered. So what I did in this scenario is I leveled up and I put Cassiopeia on. I gave her the Giant's Belt as well. What would have been better is if I didn't give that rod to Jace and instead made a Morellos and the Cassiopeia. That would have been a much better early unit to consider. But nonetheless, this is the gambit that I made, and unfortunately I kind of had to stick with it. This guy ended up beating me. He was very strong, and I unfortunately could not continue the win streak. But again, I actually don't think Morellos and Cassiopeia would have made a difference right there. The only thing that I'm going to have an issue with is if I don't end up getting another rod somewhere down the line, which in Treasure Trove, I mean, the reason I made that decision, by the way, was because it's Treasure Trove, and I thought in my head, well, it's Treasure Trove, right? So I'm gonna get a rod at some point. It's quite, you get loads of items in Treasure Trove. Obviously, you can't always rely on that. This poor guy unfortunately disconnected very early on. You can't always rely on that in Treasure Trove to get the right items, but in my head that's what I thought. And also, like, rod is also a good item for rod is like also a pretty solid item for Jace, even down the line. Like Ionic Spark is a great item on Jace even in the late game, and it's actually a pretty good item in Vanguard Mystics as well because it helps cut through magic resist, making Cassiopeia that much more effective. I do feel bad for that guy who only just reconnected, by the way. He obviously missed out a lot and actually missed out a couple of loot orbs in the early game. But what I would note here is actually I managed to get the 4 Vanguards very early on. And you can see I'm like, well, what do I do with this Jace? Like, do I sell him? Do I keep him on the board with the rod? And I think with 4 Vanguards, actually, the decision to sell him is probably quite good because giving that over to Cassiopeia is nice. Now, what I would say is Cassiopeia without blue buff is not nearly as effective at applying her poison. But when you've got 4 Vanguards, the fights are going to go on for a pretty significant amount of time. So therefore, Morello is still a pretty good choice. So this is something that that Vanguard Mystics, and actually I do decide to do that and give the blue buff. That was the correct decision, but I've also wasted a Jace because of that. So because I decided to put that rod on Jace early on, I actually wasted a Jace. So that's obviously a little bit of an error. Nonetheless, we're still in a strong position. We still have 4 Vanguards. We have Cassiopeia with Morellonomicon. Even with a Last Whisper, it's still taking time for someone like a Caitlyn to get through my 4 Vanguard frontline. And also what you might have been noticing is I've been selling a lot of units. I've been very heavily pushing for gold thresholds, and I've been managed to level up to level 5 and hit 40 gold by the neutral round. This is not uncommon in Treasure Trove. This is actually quite a classic Treasure Trove situation, but nonetheless, it's still a great position to be in for me, and quite clearly with 4 Vanguards, as well as now blue buff Morello's Cassiopeia, we're in like an optimal place. We're like in an absolutely optimal place for for Vanguard Mystic, and then finding the Bard here, this is cause enough for me to level up. The average place for people to level up is usually 3-2 because it makes more sense and you don't end up wasting too much gold. In this particular instance, even though I'm not on a win streak, I think that my composition is sufficiently strong to level up and go to 6. The Mystic Edition here, alongside the fact that I have blue buff Cassiopeia with a GA on my Jace, this makes me feel confident enough that my composition is strong. And now that I'm level 6, also the increased chances of finding Cassiopeias, Jaces, and a Wukong, as you can see here, is a pretty big deal. I take the Leona out here because Leona actually has almost the same amount of HP as a Wukong, but Wukong is infinitely more effective. So, like, Leona is always going to get dropped. Poppy is better than Leona, and Leona is like the worst Vanguard unless you're playing a cybernetic form. But yeah, Leona is the worst Vanguard in this instance, so that's why I drop her for the 1-star Wukong. 1-star Wukong is actually better than 2-star Leona, even though you may think in your head that 2-star Leona is very good. 1-star Wukong is actually much better because of the CC that he provides, and he's only got about 200 HP less than the Leona. So this was in my eyes the correct decision to make here. Picking up the Nautilus, the extra Jace here, of course. If I win this, I sell the Blitzcrank to get up to 50 gold, and then what we're doing from that point onwards is we're just going to be investing experience into levels to get to level 7. And as you can see here, Jace GA, Jace GA is absolutely insane, by the way. I would thoroughly recommend, if you're playing Jace in any Vanguard composition, that you look towards a GA option, because he is so good with GA. Like, a lot of times he'll come back from the dead, cast his ultimate, and win you a fight. It's happened so many times for me in games that I've played. So I think the best option here for me is a Wukong with a Rod. Now, the reason I want a Wukong with a Rod is A, I can make an Ionic Spark Wukong and it's perfectly fine. And B, it gets me another Wukong. Wukong is one of the most contested units in the game right now. Actually, someone did an analysis on Reddit to find out what was the most prevalent unit across every composition in Platinum Plus games of TFT. And Wukong was the most common unit from stage 4 onwards. He's the most used unit in TFT, the most contested unit in TFT as well. So getting a Wukong and 2 Wukongs very early on is a really nice bonus for me, because it's going to allow me to potentially have an Ionic Spark Wukong. Sorry, my brain farted. It's early. I'm not feeling very well today, guys. Sorry. I'm actually not feeling particularly well. Something that I'm doing that's really stupid, by the way. I'm not playing the Wukong with the Rod. There is no reason for me to not play the Wukong with the Rod. And, you know, on reflection, I have no idea why I'm doing it. I'm looking at this game thinking, what on earth are you doing? Now, unfortunately, I lose to the perfect item Vayne. He also had a Thresh at level 7. He rolled down. So I was never going to beat that. Irrespective, though, we're in a situation where I'm still in a great spot. You know, I've got 3 Astro, so Bard is going to be generating me some experience. I don't know, I haven't got 3 Astro, that was someone else. I should have 3 Astro. 3 Astro would be the play here. Even though the Karma on the Cassiopeia is nice, 3 Astro should definitely be the play in my eyes. I'm actually picking up a load of Nautiluses here, and I'm going to roll a little bit further just to look for a couple of upgrades. And as you can see, I decide to actually put the Wukong on with GA as well, and I give a Rod over to my Jace also. I have a Nico's Help, which there are a couple of things that I could use Nico's Help on. What I would say to anyone thinking about using Nico's Help is don't worry about getting huge value out of it on a legendary unit or a 5 cost. If you need that Nico's Help to keep yourself stabilized in the mid game, definitely think about using it in that way. I use it on my Cassiopeia because 2-star Cassiopeia is actually such an important unit for me in this particular composition. So I roll down just to hit some 2-star upgrades. You know, like I said, you can roll at 7 to do that. And 2-star Cassiopeia is such a massive upgrade for me in general in terms of my composition's power. And you can see that I've just suddenly become that much stronger in these fights by having that 2-star Cassiopeia on the board. I'm going to add the Soraka because I think she's actually probably more useful overall than the Karma. 2-star Soraka would be such a huge addition to this lineup right now. 2-star Bard is helping me. This is something that I would say that if you've got a Bard, and especially if you've got him 2-star, don't worry too much about using your gold for rolling. Because if you have a 2-star bard, he's going to be generating experience for you most of the time pretty naturally, and that's going to allow you to get to level 8 without actually having to invest gold to do so. So in this game right here, I'm happy to not spend gold on leveling and spend gold on rolling, because the bard is naturally generating me experience on a round by round basis. So I go for the vest here. I can't quite remember why I went for the vest. I think it's because it potentially gives me Titan's Resolve. But nonetheless, I was just kind of stumped for what kind of items would have been good in that situation. I can't remember if there was a rod available. I probably would have made a Rabadon's on Jace, by the way. Rabadon's on Jace is actually a pretty solid item, even at 2-star. But also, like a Locket of the Iron Solari is perfectly fine as well. So, as you can see here, we are 2-star Soraka. We've got a pretty strong comp now, especially with the Cassiopeia being 2-star. And this is the stage in the game where Vanguard Mystics are very strong. If you don't have Last Whispers, if you don't have that IE Last Whisper combination that we see quite a lot of the time, then obviously it can be a real issue. So now I'm at 4-6. I decide to try and prevent my win streak from going down the drain by leveling up to 8. And everything beyond this now is going to be sort of slow leveling up towards level 9. And obviously we're going up against a 2-star Echo. That's a pretty big deal, but Karma does keep my Cassiopeia alive long enough to cast quite a few instances of her spell, and as you can see, we're able to quite effectively beat out the cyber player, continuing our win streak, which is really important because the win streak here was good going into the neutral round. Level 8 was important in that sense, that I wanted to maintain that win streak, get some extra gold in this neutral round, and then now start to build towards level 9, because we have everything that we need. Like, I don't think there's much point unless you're in like a really good economy position. Like, I'm not in a good economy position to go for 3 stars right now. There's no options for me to go for 3 stars. So I'm obviously pretty close to 3 stars in this instance, but for me right here, I think that I'd rather just go to level 9 and get the Thresh Urgot combo going. So obviously I don't make Rebel Spat. There's a reason I don't make Rebel Spat. A lot of people will often just combine whatever they've got left at this stage in the game and say, I'm going to make this item because that's all I can make. Once you get to stage 6 on the carousels, sometimes they offer individual items. So instead of making a Rebel Spat, which is completely useless for me, I'm just going to separate out the vest and the spat, because I could get another spat and get a Force of Nature, and that would actually be really, really important for me. So that's why I don't make the Rebel Spat in this particular circumstance. If I get to stage 6, which with 74 HP at stage 5, it's quite likely that I will. I know there's a real potential for me to get to a Force of Nature situation. Unfortunately, I just end up losing here, but luckily I've got a couple of Urgots on my bench, and those Urgots are going to be used for when I find the Thresh 2 specifically, but I'm keeping those Urgots on my bench because they're going to be an important factor of my late game. Or at least my important attempted factor of my late game. I built Zephyr for a reason, by the way. I really rate Zephyr as an item. I think it's an incredible late game item, especially now that people like Jinx are not using things like QSS. We don't have many Jinxes using any kind of defensive itemization, and Quicksilver is not a particularly sought after item as well. So that's why sorry, Rupert's just woken up, so I'm a little bit distracted. Yeah, that's why I that's why I think Zephyr's a really, really good item. Sorry, I could just hear Rupert crying. I'll have to go get him after I've done the video. He'll be alright for the moment. Giant Slayer, by the way, I put on Jace. You know, like, basically it works off spell damage as well, and Jace has really high individual spell damage, which means he's going to get the most true damage out of that item. So that's the reason that I give Jace the Giant Slayer. For the most part, we're just looking to Zephyr, you know, important units where we can. Zephyring the 2-star Thresh with Infiltrator is actually pretty good in this instance, but you can see, like, this is why Vanguard Mystic starts to fall off towards the late game. Like, I am losing to a lot of Blaster Brawler players pretty heavily at this stage in the time. And I'm also thinking about when I should be going to level 9. Now, obviously at 40 gold before the neutral round, what I would say about this is that I probably wouldn't be going to level 9 until after the neutral round, and obviously the reason for that is that it's quite clear that I can get a free round of experience that I'm always going to beat the neutral round. But look at me losing to all the Brawler Blaster players, like the IE Last Whisper combination that's just tearing through my front line. This is why Vanguard Mystic, in my opinion, falls off unless you get to level 9 and you get the Thresh Urgot combo. This right here is not going to win you a game. This set of units, 4 Vanguards, 4 Mystics all at 2-star, most of the time is not going to win you a game. It might do at lower elos, but at higher elos, it starts to fall off pretty rapidly, especially if you don't have a Bramble Vest for your front line. So this is why I now actively level up to level 9, by the way. I now have an Urgot with a rapid fire cannon, which is actually a pretty big deal. Urgot with a rapid fire cannon, actually a really, really big deal. And getting a 2-star Urgot with a rapid fire cannon is even more so important. And so this is going to show you what Urgot can do. Instantly pulls in the vein. With the rapid fire cannon, he goes for the furthest reaching unit, and that's always going to be the snipers in most circumstances versus cybernetics. A lot of the times it's going to be the Jinx when you're playing up against rebels. So that is why I decided to make this play. As you can see here, I'm transitioning now out of the Lulu into the Bard. I'm actually rolling specifically for a Cassiopeia. I want to get a Cassiopeia 3. I don't really think the 3-star Vanguards are going to help me that much. And I'm going to pop the Zephyr on my Soraka right at the end to go after the Thresh, and then I instantly eat him with the Urgot, which is really nice. Now, again, I'm still looking like I'm losing to Blaster Brawler players, but I do end up winning this one and knocking him out, which is fantastic. And I think part of that was because I ate the Thresh with my Urgot. Urgot really is super good with rapid fire cannon. And I'm actually going to try and position specifically for this Vayne player. I'm going to switch my Urgot right at the last moment because I feel like the Vayne's going to go to the other side of the screen, which she has, and that's now going to allow my Urgot to pull in the Vayne and then consequentially pull in the team as well. But you can see here, grabs the Vayne because the Vayne dives away from the enemy team almost all the time, and I'm going to pull in the Teemo now, which is his last DPS, and then we're going to pull in the Thresh eventually as well, or just kill him outright. So RFC is such an important item in this circumstance. So, guys, what do you think I'm going to go for here? I talked about it earlier. Yes, we go for the Force of Nature. That's going to get me an extra unit on the board. And that unit can be anything. But realistically, there are like loads of really good options, and Thresh is a fantastic one because it gives me Chrono. And I'm actually going to sell my board to go for another Urgot on the bench. 3-star Cassiopeia right now, not important. What I'm doing is also last-minute swapping. I'm last-minute swapping my Urgot over because, again, he's going to pull in the Vayne. The Vayne gets pulled in. I always think that this chap will be last minute swapping over, and we just have a really good round here, which is enough to knock him out of the game and win. Urgot with rapid fire cannon, by the way, absolutely broken.